Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the outpost of the Attorney General's office here in Cranston on Howard Avenue, a facility where we actually have the ability to bring so many members of law enforcement and beyond together to talk about a really important issue and a major step forward for all Rhode Islanders with this body cam program that we are about to roll out to officers all across the state. I want to begin by acknowledging and thanking a number of individuals who have had a significant part in making this day happen. And you can see by looking around the room just how many voices, thoughts, input was necessary to make today possible. I want to begin by recognizing my colleagues in law enforcement, the chiefs of police. They have come together to work with my office and Colonel Weaver at the State Police at the Department of Public Safety to put together a strong program, a program that reaches nearly every police officer, frontline police officer in the state, and is doing it in a way, according to a policy, that frankly had challenges in putting it together in terms of what made the most sense and what would serve the public the best, but they worked really hard to make that happen. And I want to acknowledge four chiefs in particular that worked as a team, if you will, a subset of chiefs to work with our team to make this happen. That would be Mike Winquist from Cranston, Brad Connor from Warwick, Sean Corrigan from Narragansett, who's also the president of the Police Chiefs Association, Scott Rains from Little Compton, and of course, the executive director of the Police Chiefs Association, Sid Wardell, who has just done such great work in pulling us all together and making this happen. Again, I want to acknowledge Colonel Weaver and Major Ludovici for her work on this important topic. And so that is a part of what brings us here today. This is a really important day for Rhode Island, and frankly, a really good one. As Attorney General, I've said before, typically when I'm standing in front of a podium, I don't get a chance to smile very often because the news that I'm delivering is oftentimes bad news. But this is a really good day for Rhode Islanders. We are making enormous advances technologically in this country, and as law enforcement, we need to do the same. Things aren't the way they were when I became an assistant attorney general back in 1996. Back then, for example, DNA was rarely used. I think my colleague Steve Dambrook used DNA for the first time on a homicide case out of Little Compton. Today we're using DNA all the time, as Commissioner Parry knows and Chief Clements knows, in Providence as we pursue gun violence. Technology is advancing, and law enforcement, as I said, needs to advance with it. And body cameras are an important piece of that. The reality is that the public, whether it be a judge or a jury or the public generally, expects to see what happened out on the streets. And body cameras are obviously a means of making that happen. It reminds me of my days when I was United States Attorney when, there was this notion in federal law enforcement that we never had to record a defendant's statement or we never had to record a witness statement. And those federal agencies had to be, frankly, encouraged and ultimately pulled into a place about a decade ago where they too needed to record statements. And so technology advances, the expectations of all of us in law enforcement rise, and body cameras are a significant way of meeting that renewed expectation. I think there's a lot of credit to go around today. I particularly want to thank those law enforcement agencies that were headed down this road or had headed down this road long before we were thinking of a statewide initiative. Providence Police, again, Chief Clements, thanks for being here, has had body cameras on for quite a long time and used them to good effect for investigative purposes, to understand what happened in an interaction between a police officer and a member of the public. It's all about finding truth, and through truth we find justice. Newport Police has also had a program for some time, and they've been really helpful, those two departments. Again, Commissioner Parry, the chief in Newport, have been really helpful to us in guiding our efforts to come up with a policy that really makes sense for all of us. And so today we are here to announce the rolling out of the money to put cameras on everyone, as well as the completion of our policy that will be in effect within a matter of a couple of weeks. We're going through the Secretary of State process to roll that out formally, but that policy is now complete. based on best practices and input that we've gotten from a lot of quarters. I want to recognize others who you'll be hearing from today. Of course, Colonel Weaver, who will give us the details as to where the money will go and how much money is going where. Again, I want to recognize and thank Chief Sean Corrigan from Narragansett, who's done such great work on this project. Senator Jack Reid and all the delegation, Senator Whitehouse, Representative Congressman Cicilline, who's here, Jim Langevin, Congressman Langevin, for bringing additional money to the table. Members of the General Assembly, Representative Batista, Senator Jonathan Acosta were really spearheading this program at the General Assembly. But we all know that things at the General Assembly oftentimes don't get over the finish line without the help and assistance of leadership. And so I want to thank Speaker Sakarchi and the Senate President as well, Dominic Ruggiero, for his leadership, their leadership in making today happen. We're also going to hear from Jim Vincent. And Jim has been a strong voice for the community, helping us understand why body cameras matter to the community as they do to all of us and law enforcement as well. And finally, I just want to acknowledge Mayor Grebian, who has joined us. I may be missing some other elected leaders here, but I want to acknowledge you, Mayor, for your support of this program. The reality is that as a result of today's announcement, we are going to be putting body cameras on frontline officers in 42 law enforcement agencies across the state. That is a lot of law enforcement officers, which will now have the tools to bring us into the century in which we are operating. And so I'm grateful for all of that work. All right, and so with that, I'm going to turn matters over to Colonel Weaver and ask him to share with you the mechanics of where we go from here. Colonel, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I am proud to say the Department of Public Safety and the Rhode Island State Police have played a key role in securing federal funds and constructing the policies that will govern the use of the body-worn camera program. We are excited that 42 departments will participate in the program and that it will include 1,773 cameras. We are fortunate to have professionalism and collaboration in state and municipal agencies that allow us to work together to deliver effective and cost-efficient programs for the people we serve. Today's announcement is the culmination of months of this productive teamwork, and I am thankful to our state and municipal partners for their efforts. During the last year, we have worked collaboratively with our partners in law enforcement to develop the policies that will govern the use and operation of body-worn cameras by police departments statewide. All municipal and state police departments receiving grant funds through the statewide body-worn camera program must adopt this policy that protects constitutional rights, documents critical interactions between police and members of the public, promotes transparency, and reflects the thoughtful input of citizens and advocacy groups throughout the public comment process. Outfitting our troopers and members of law enforcement with body-worn cameras is a key milestone as we work to address the issues that are challenges in policing today. Cameras will add transparency, provide accountability, and give a point of view of perspective to every police contact. I expect that cameras will foster greater trust between citizens and their police departments, helping to lower complaints and improve relationships. These cameras will substantially improve the quality of evidence we collect and conduct investigations more efficiently. I appreciate the support and efforts of Governor McKee, the policymakers and elected officials who have allocated funding for this important program, and I look forward to seeing the cameras deployed in the very near future. Thank you. I would now like to ask Chief Sean Corrigan, the Police Chief of the Narragansett Police Department and President of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. The police departments of Rhode Island are dedicated to upholding the best policing policies in an effort to keep our communities and our officers safe. In 2020, Rhode Island Police Department signed on to the 20 for 20 campaign. The 20 promises that we made to our communities were a commitment to adopting the following best practices so that we continue to carry out our duties fairly and impartially. As part of this initiative, each police department pledged to explore establishing a body-worn camera program. The Rhode Island Police Chief Association pledged to explore funding and policy guidelines. The Rhode Island Police Chief Association has been a strong proponent of the implementation and use of body-worn cameras as a valuable tool for modern policing. Body-worn cameras have been shown to provide immense benefit to both police departments and the communities they serve. They further law enforcement objectives as an additional tool to collect evidence and information, as well as facilitate professionalism and enhance training and opportunities. In addition, technology can positively impact police-community relations by expediting the resolution of police misconduct complaints and bolstering public trust by improving transparency and accountability. I would like to thank every stakeholder that has been involved in this process. This includes the Attorney General's office, state police leadership, many municipal police chiefs, and participants from the police departments themselves, ranking officers, Rhode Island legislature, and the governor's offices as well. We also received feedback from the labor unions, the IBPO, FOP, and the Troopers Union. And we also received feedback from the public, which was always the first step of all of our policy meetings. We recognize that not every community is able to take on the cost of developing a body-worn camera program or to obtain the technical or personnel resources. The funding announced today will help ensure communities have the necessary support. I also wish to recognize all the chiefs across the state who have shown the willingness to back this initiative and who have begun pilot programs throughout the state. Positive police-community relationships are built on mutual trust, legitimacy, and transparency. Body-worn cameras are an asset that can help strengthen the foundation of these relationships and, in turn, the safety of our communities. The Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association is pleased to see this important initiative move forward, and we will continue to support the state's police departments as their individual programs progress. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. It is an honor to be here. And let me begin, as the Attorney General did, by saluting the police chiefs that are here, the police officers that are here. I'm extraordinarily proud of the police departments in the state of Rhode Island. They are the best in the country, in my view, because of their commitment to the communities they serve, because of their professionalism, and the great pride they have in serving their communities. So thank you for this. The Attorney General, thank you, as always. Colonel Weaver, thank you for your great leadership in this regard. My colleague, Congressman Cicilline, David, thank you. And State Representative Jose Batista and State Senator Jonathan Acosta, as was pointed out, the final sort of mile to a touchdown, whatever, it comes from the state legislature. So thank you for your great work there. Thank you very much. And then we've got Jim Vincent, who's a great, great community leader and works so closely with our police departments. There are so many to thank. Again, I have to particularly point out the great work of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association. Its Executive Director, Chief Sid Wardell, thank you very, very much. And also the Attorney General's Community Advisory Board, because it was intimately involved in these details. This all, I think, began about a year ago when the delegation announced a $1.5 million grant from the Department of Justice to the Rhode Island Department of Public Safety. So I'm just delighted today that through careful and thorough work, they're able to distribute these funds in terms of about 1,773, as Colonel Weaver said, devices, and also more than 42, or at least 42 law enforcement agencies will participate. Rhode Island cities and towns have been leaders in this effort. The Providence Police Department, under the leadership of Commissioner Perry and Chief Hugh Clemens, is one of the first departments in New England to have body cameras on their police officers. So Rhode Island once again led the way. This federal grant will help other departments, those 42 law enforcement agencies, have the same types of equipment. And it's critical, because the evidence is clear that body-worn cameras help police keep our communities safer. By documenting encounters between police and the public, cameras provide law enforcement and prosecutors with highly reliable evidence to win convictions and secure plea deals. Cameras also help our communities by holding the police accountable. Members of the public and police officers across Rhode Island will now have accurate records of their interactions. In a world where anyone can take out a cell phone and film someone in public, maintaining accurate records of law enforcement encounters has never been more enforcement. If we want true accountability, we need to ensure that there is a video from the police officer also. That provides both sides of the story, which is essential for all of us. And I think this factor will elevate the interactions between citizens and police officers in a very positive way. It all comes down to trust. That's what these officers and these chiefs have established in their communities. Thank you very much. And now it's my great pleasure to recognize and turn over to my colleague in the House, Congressman David Cicilline, who is a critical member of the House Judiciary Committee. David.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to be here. I want to thank the Attorney General for inviting me to participate in this really exciting announcement. Of course, it's always great to be with our senior senator, Senator Reid, and I know we all speak on behalf of both Senator Whitehouse and Congressman Langevin. I also want to recognize State Senator Jonathan Acosta, who he, along with Representative Jose Bautista, I know led the fight in the General Assembly, and I want to congratulate them and thank them. Of course, Chief Corrigan and Colonel Weaver, Chief Clemens, the other chiefs that are here, and of course Jim Vincent, who plays such an important role to be sure that the community's voice is heard throughout this process. I want to say congratulations to all the state and local agencies who are receiving funding today through the new statewide body-worn camera program. A wise police chief once told me that the single most powerful weapon we have to fight crime is not a firearm, is not some military-style equipment, but it's the trust and confidence of the community. And I think the last few years have shown us how vital it is to foster good relationships between our communities and local police departments, and to equip law enforcement with the tools that they need to function efficiently and safely, while also protecting our communities and maintaining transparency and accountability. And body cameras can be a tool to help accomplish this goal and provide for better evidence collection and really building trust between the police and the community. Unfortunately, though, even though they may want to, many law enforcement agencies across the country and even here in Rhode Island couldn't afford to provide body cameras to their officers. And in fact, a November 2018 study by the Bureau of Justice Statistics found that agencies not using body-worn cameras stated that cost was the primary barrier. And so Rhode Island has taken this really innovative approach, unanimously passing state legislation last year to tackle this hurdle by establishing a statewide body-worn camera program, building on the extraordinary work of the Attorney General's office that has been really focused on researching best practices and engaging with body camera vendors and with the Police Chiefs Association. This program will help, as has been mentioned, 42 local and state public safety agencies purchase 1,773 cameras and also cover the cost of related hardware, software, storage, and administration. I want to end where I began to really say thank you particularly to the local leaders, Senator Acosta and Representative Bautista, who championed this legislation and worked really collaboratively and thoughtfully with a group of stakeholders to create a program that enhances community safety and trust and supports law enforcement. Our state leaders included $15 million into the budget to establish this program, and I was remarking to the Attorney General, it's usually the case that we bring federal money and there has to be a 10% match. This was the reverse. The state made a $50 million investment. We brought a 10% match of $1.5 million, but I think it shows that this is a priority at the local, state, and federal level, and it's going to make a real difference in communities all across Rhode Island, help us fight crime, improve policing, and build trust. So again, thank you to everyone who's been part of this, and we all look forward to seeing these funds put to good use. And with that, I now would like to welcome one of the architects of this program, Senator Jonathan Acosta, to the podium.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you to everybody who's here. I won't be redundant in naming everybody again. But it would probably come as no surprise to those of you gathered here and those of you who may be watching at home that we all approach this from very different perspectives, from very different angles. And personally, I'm very grateful that despite coming from different places, from different experiences, from even on the side of the badge, from policing very different communities, that we were able to sit down and have difficult conversations about what this policy would, could, and should look like. I'm particularly grateful to the two local law enforcement agencies in the district that I represent. So Colonel Robeson, Chief Robeson, Chief Gonsalves, Captain Driscoll in Pawtucket, Sergeant Matuk in Central Falls, who were willing to have very candid conversations and who are willing to work together and aggregate up to the state level as we find ourselves here today to make this announcement. So a little over a year ago, we took one step. Today, we take another step in the form of this announcement, and I would invite everybody to be both proud and critical. I think we should be proud to have a statewide policy. We are one of the first states to do this. We are one of the first states to collaborate with almost every single law enforcement agency in the state, with the Attorney General's office, with the General Assembly, to sit down and say, hey, here's what you can expect from a body-worn camera policy in our state. It doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter which agency it is. The expectations are the same. And that's helpful for everybody. That's helpful for your lay citizen who's interacting with law enforcement. It's helpful for law enforcement who's being trained centrally and who might move from department to department or community to community. I invite us to be critical in at least two ways. The first is in interrogating those agencies or that agency who maybe decided not to participate in the program and have candid conversations about why. And the second is in recognizing what I'm very grateful for the Attorney General's office in recognizing, that this policy is imperfect. It was made by people, and all policies made by people, and particularly in a domain like law enforcement that is constantly evolving and the demands are changing, needs to be revisited. And so over the course of the next year, I invite law enforcement, members of the public, lawmakers, members of the Attorney General's office to keep an eye on this. What's working? What's not working? How can we make it better so that we can continue to try to perfect something that is imperfect? And so I want to thank everybody again, and it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce my colleague and friend in the House, Rep. Jose Batista.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is so great to see you. What a collection of members of the community here in Rhode Island. It's hard with so many great speakers who've already spoken and said so much of what I've already wanted to say, and so I'll just try to keep my comments very brief to about maybe 3 points. And number one is that today I am proud of Rhode Island. I'm proud of Rhode Island every day, but particularly today for so many of the things that Senator Acosta mentioned. These issues are difficult, and we're both still technically first-term elected officials, hopefully soon to be second-term elected officials, but on the campaign trail, it's very easy to talk to constituents and to want to tell them what it is that they want to hear, and that you're going to get into the General Assembly and move things around and make the world more just. And I don't want to speak for Jonathan, but I think that once you have the privilege to step into these roles and to serve, you understand that change is a lot more difficult than you think. And that collaboration and working together is ultimately the best path to get there. So as I look across the room and I see so many members of our federal delegation, of our state delegation, of our General Assembly, of our press, and of our police officers, I am moved by that, thinking that we were all able to come together to put this ball forward. I suspect not everyone is happy with this legislation or with the details of the policies of this idea, but as far as I know, I've yet to know one piece of legislation that is perfect. And so I'm humbled and honored to work with each and every one of you, and I appreciate everything that everyone has done to make today a reality. Point number two, I want to speak directly to police officers, of which there are so many here today. I want to speak for myself. I know that In the past, many have tried to speak for me, and so let me speak clearly. I see you, I hear you, I appreciate you. I understand that too many times you are literally putting your lives on the line to serve Rhode Island, and nobody underestimates that. And so to the extent that we talk about accountability, to the extent that we talk about justice or reform in criminal justice, please understand that that has nothing to do with any individual as a person, but us talking about how to perfect our institutions. Which, thinking about that, my third point is what I think about this moving forward. We've been dealing with this issue for a very long time. This issue is not technology or cameras or race or anything of the like. In fact, if you go back as far as Benjamin Franklin, you hear him say, those who, what is it, how does it go? You can't choose either liberty or security. You have to have both, right? And that's a friction, that's really hard work. Preserving the civil liberties of individuals. Many people, thousands of people that I've represented in the public defender's office and in private practice. You cannot preserve their civil liberties without talking about public safety. It is not an either or, it is an and. And these cameras, in addition to providing evidence and helping the public understand what's happening, are also going to give rise to some very uncomfortable questions about civil liberties. As a defense attorney, I'm well aware that our Supreme Court has language regarding resisting arrest along the lines that the street or the public or the community, that is not the place to challenge the law. If an officer is going to arrest you, even if you feel that there's no reason, et cetera, that is not the place to fight the law. And I agree. So we are creating the place where we can have those conversations. What is an arrest? What is custody? What is reasonable suspicion? These are all conversations that we've been having since the beginning of this country, and I suspect we'll continue to have for a long time. And it is my hope that we are able to do the best to harness our collective technology, experience, effort, to ultimately achieve the best result, which is safety for everybody. So thank you so much. It's taken a lot of work to get to this point. This is the beginning, not the end. And with that said, I'd like to conclude my remarks and invite a personal friend and colleague, somebody who's gotten my name wrong at these conferences before, but somebody whose name I'm going to get right, Mr. Jim Vincent, the president of the NAACP.
Wow. Well, thanks everybody for being here. This is truly a great day in Rhode Island. And I'm the last speaker, so. Anyway, in June 2021, I participated in the announcement of the statewide body-worn camera program, and I am pleased to see how far the initiative has come, going from a well-thought-out policy concept to a program with guidelines and the purchasing of cameras. Police body-worn cameras are tools that we have seen become a best practice throughout the country. And Rhode Island law enforcement agencies now have the opportunity to implement them in a significant way. Not only was this a worthwhile idea, but it was a worthwhile investment. And we can thank leaders at the state and federal level for making it happen. Thank you. The entities that are involved in making this happen did so because they listened to a variety of constituencies and community members and realized that body-worn cameras can benefit everyone. Everyone. This tool can dramatically improve fact-finding in law enforcement, investigations and use of force reviews, and ultimately help build that trust between police agencies and the communities they serve, which is what we want. These are tools that we have come to expect from our police departments. We've seen their use quell unwarranted criticisms, and we've seen them bring troubling conduct to light. Either way, they help promote accountability and transparency to police work. Used right, they can be a force for good and a vehicle towards greater professionalism and better training. I applaud the legislative efforts, especially of Representative Bautista and Senator Acosta and others who made this funding a reality. Our federal delegation for always supporting our communities with federal resources, the Office of the Attorney General for their work on the rules surrounding these cameras, and finally, the Rhode Island State Police in managing the grant program. And most importantly, our police chiefs and rank and file members of law enforcement for their steadfast commitment and support of this program and their service to the people of this state. I thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. And, I want to just kind of take us back to where we started. When I look at this issue, this objective, this program, it really begins with a look at Providence, understanding that body cameras can help. And there are a lot of perspectives about body cameras, but they can help finding truth and justice and accountability for everyone. Then the question is, how do we pay for it? That was one of the biggest challenges. How do we pay for this program? How do we get body cameras on 1,773 individuals? That took the leadership of the General Assembly and the federal delegation to help us close that gap. Now, the third component was, how do we take these cameras? It's hard enough to get the money. That was hard. Getting a policy that balanced all of the competing interests. When I say competing interests, what do I mean by that? When are when is body camera footage turned over to the public? When must a police officer turn it off? When can they turn it on? When must they turn it off? When can they turn it off? How do we protect privacy interests of individuals? How do we make sure that cameras aren't turned on to record peaceful protests for reasons other than law enforcement reason? How do we put all of that into one place and make it credible and reasonable and advance our goals? And we hope that we have reached the first step in that today with the input of everybody in this room and beyond. It is a living document, as several speakers have said. It is a document that will need revision and frankly, some more steps towards hopefully perfection. But we have started today, and I believe this is a strong step forward. So with that, we'll conclude our press conference. If there are a few questions, we'll take a few. Otherwise, thank you everybody for coming.
Is there one department that opted out or hasn't joined, or?
There is one department, Steve, at this time that Smithfield that hasn't decided to participate yet, but they'll have that opportunity going forward.
Did they say why they didn't want to participate?
I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak for the department. These are, as I said, these are tools, and each department has to decide for itself whether it's a tool they want to take advantage of.
Can we see the policy?
Yeah, the policy is public. It's attached to our press release, so you can certainly see it. And there have been drafts in the past. We've taken public input. We've adopted some of that input, but the final version of the policy is attached to the release that was distributed today.
Can you answer
I'm sorry, Steve, I think you always want a hard copy, and yes, you can have one there. Here, and you will have one.
Can you talk about some of the policies, so when they will be turned on, when they will be turned off, if they can be turned off in a situation?
Yeah, so it's, I only chuckle because I reread the policy again today, because it's hard to capture in just a few words. And so I would encourage you to take a look at it, but I will say this, that generally speaking, when a police officer in their official capacity has an interaction with a member of the public, a call for service, an emergency driving situation, an investigation, they need to put that camera on. And then there are times when they can turn them off. Typically, the presumption is they'll be on until the interaction is over, but there may be reasons why a person may not want to speak to a police officer while being recorded, and so that may be a reason to turn it off. But all of those reasons have to be documented so that the circumstances of that turning off the camera can be evaluated. So this was a conversation that went on between law enforcement, the Department of Public Safety. As I said, Major Ludovici had a huge role here. The police chiefs that I mentioned earlier, those 4 chiefs plus Sid Wardell. Our office, I want to recognize Dan Sutton and Kate Sabatini from my office, who worked really hard on this to try to strike the right balance, follow best practices. Sometimes we had to come up with our own approach, but we think we have struck the right balance. But I do recognize that there will be tweaks that will be necessary.
The private universities that have police departments are not part of this?
Well, our view is that public agencies ought to benefit at this point from public money. And then private agencies, they're going to have to make their own choices whether they are willing to invest in this program. But look, money for this program was one of the initial challenges. I think when I talked to police chiefs, going back a number of years, one of the challenges was, how do we pay for it? We were asking us to make a commitment. How do we pay for it? And what we did not want to do, this is why it was voluntary, we did not want to impose a mandate on individual municipalities to have to do this. And so this is a voluntary program that most have taken advantage of.
General, Congressman Cicilline said that trust is a big element between the community and the police department, but sometimes there's a tension between your office and, say, a high-profile case where there is a lot of public interest.
Yeah.
And body-worn camera video being released. How do you square that in the policy?
the way we squared it in the policy is that generally speaking, once a investigation is substantially complete, and that has more meaning than it may sound like at first blush. In my mind, what that means is that every percipient witness, meaning everybody who had eyes on that incident, has been interviewed and their statements have been taken, so that there can't be an accusation, fair or unfair, later that their testimony is changed based on what they might have seen on a news outlet. At that point, the footage would be released. But I will tell you, Tim, that was one of the hardest things that we struggled with. We have an obligation to be fair to a defendant, to be fair to an accused, regardless of who that accused is. At the same time, we recognize the public interest, and we also recognize that the longer you sit on some of this evidence, the more suspicion there is that government somehow is holding something back. And so that's how we try to strike that balance, recognizing that it is a bit of a challenge.
Smithfield notwithstanding, does every department have to adopt every aspect of this policy, or is there some autonomy within each department where they might say, well, this doesn't work for Central Falls, or this doesn't work for Coventry, so we're going to tweak the policy, or do they have to take it wholesale?
They have to take it, they can tweak the policy, but only to provide more protections. They cannot, for the public, they cannot change their policy in contravention of this policy.
So this is the basement? not the
Correct,
ceiling.
correct. It's a lot like the APRA that I know you are very familiar with. Yes.
Outline what kind of consequences a police officer could face if they do turn off their camera during an interaction.
Yeah, we've really left that to police chiefs. I mean, one of the things that I was really focused on as we move through this is, we're prosecutors. What we really want as prosecutors is we want to know exactly what happened because we're the ones who are presenting evidence to a court. Police officers have a different perspective. They're on the street. They're the men and women who are literally putting their lives on the line for the community. They and their chiefs understand the challenges they face as they work through their mission. And so there were a number of forks in the road, frankly, where I spoke to chiefs, and the chiefs convinced me that a lot of what we were talking about should be addressed through training. And so you'll see in the policy there are some of those forks. We're going to train on these issues. And so whether it be discipline for infractions or not following the policy or training, really want to leave those things to chiefs. Look, I think this is not a situation from my perspective where the right approach is to find a violation of the policy and say, oh, we got you and we're going to hold you accountable. The idea is to take this policy, train on it, use the best practices. It's better for police officers and it's better for the public.
Just to be clear, is this enough cameras for like every uniformed officer? Or
Yes, yes. Yeah, the goal was to put a camera on every frontline police officer for every department and municipality that wanted them. That was not an easy hill to climb. It required the delegation to step up. It required the General Assembly to step up. And that's why everyone in this room shares a great deal of credit in getting us to today and beyond here as well.
So this could be a dumb question, but how do you put a body camera on an officer that's not wearing a uniform, a normal uniform? We see officers around Providence and other cities that do not wear uniforms, but they're clearly identified that they're officers.
Right.
They're not undercover, they're just in plain clothes.
Yeah, so we're leaving that to the individual departments to sort through that. But what we want to capture here is interactions between police and the public when police are acting in their official capacity. Now, certainly, as you I think allude to, when a police officer is undercover, that's not going to be the situation. But the idea is when a known police officer is interacting with a member of the public, that we have the availability of the body camera to capture that interaction. Yes.
That's what must be happening.
Very shortly, and the money is, as I said, the policy is complete. It's moving through the Secretary of State's process. As soon as each department signs on to that, and they have, then the money will begin to flow. We'll get these on police officers very quickly, Steve.
Two questions. Are they all getting the same exact camera?
Look, I'm going to defer to either Colonel Weaver or Sid Wardell on that. I believe so, but don't hold me to that. The mechanics of which camera and exactly which model is not where my head is at. I will say this, that I know Chief Monahan from South Kingstown is here with an officer who has a camera. So if anybody wants to see one, I hope I didn't just say something that was correct. There he is right there. He's the gentleman in the baseball cap and the taser on his left hip. So you can go over there and take a look at the equipment. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And then my other question, really quickly, is if one department adopts this policy, will every officer in that department be wearing the cameras, or is that up to?
Every uniformed police officer will have one, and they will be trained on how to use them. And then, Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, so there's different interactions where police officers are hoping that someone will cooperate with them. Someone is making a decision about how much they want to cooperate
Yeah.
with police. And I just wonder, as the public becomes more aware, there could be a camera running here. What advice would you give to members of the public who are in that situation? They don't want to speak on camera, but they want to talk to the police officer, in the middle of one of these interactions. What should they say, and what ability does the officer have to turn that camera off?
So the officer does have that ability. We built that into the policy. They're encouraged to turn it on. But look, if you talk to these police chiefs and others out here, I can look at every one of these chiefs, and they didn't start at chief. They've all been on the street. Chief Goncalves and Pawtucket, everybody else in this room has been on the street. And they know how to train their officers, how to handle those situations. Sure, there are going to be times when that interaction would ordinarily be recorded, but that witness will only talk to you if you don't record that interaction, because they're going to point out who may have committed a serious crime. And on those instances, we've given the police officers the freedom under the policy to act appropriately. But the police departments and the academies are going to train on those issues. These men and women out here know how to instruct their officers, their men and women, how to do their jobs. We're going to allow them to do that.
Are you aware of any other states doing this on a statewide basis?
The only one that I'm aware of that is also in this process and where they are relative to us, Steve, is Delaware. And I'm not sure where they are in their process, but I believe we are at the forefront of this. And I think it's going to pay off really well for both the public and law enforcement.
Is this footage going to be stored in one state database, or is every department going to be on their own system storage? How is this going to be stored, and how is it going to be accessed by public and you guys?
Yeah, so a lot of that is spelled out in the policy, but one of the big challenges several years ago was that storage was really expensive. Those costs have really come down. We'll be able to access it as the prosecutors, obviously. The public will access it as it's released by the police and in consultation with my office, depending on the circumstances of what it is that we're looking at. Obviously, if it's a criminal investigation, that'll be one thing. If it has nothing to do with a criminal investigation, that's something else. So those will be handled on a case-by-case basis.
General, just one last question. Presumably, this grant money is going to dry up, and the costs will have to be incurred by each of the individual departments. What kind of buy-in have you got from them that they'll continue these programs beyond the extent of the money?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I have no doubt that when we are at the end of this 5-year road, the benefits of this program will be very clear. I think if we were to ask Chief Clements, I think he would acknowledge that Providence will never go in another direction as long as he's in leadership there for lots of reasons. I mean, both from the public's perspective and from protecting the good men and women in blue who wear them. So my belief is that once we get this thing started, we will find the funding to do it. The delegation is always there when we need them. The General Assembly has stepped up again this time. Our office has done some good work at finding a grant here and there. So we'll make sure that we'll find the money, because there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a program that Rhode Islanders are going to want, and that police departments are going to want, and men and women in blue are going to want. I believe they want it right now. They're certainly going to want it 5 years from now.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Good to see you all.